Yeah, so yeah, this is kind of like my modular setup now. I previously, in a previous video, I talked about like getting into modular. This is like a year or so ago, but this is kind of like my setup now. It's pretty okay. It's not like huge like a lot of other people's setups, but this is kind of what works for me. When I first got into modular and buying modules, I mainly wanted to kind of process samples, and it was kind of based around that. It's like samples and then a lot of like effects, or just running samples through effects and stuff like that. I really wasn't into like sound generating kind of modules like VCOs and stuff, but I've gotten a couple over the years, but I mean over the months. But yeah, this is kind of like quickly what I'm dealing with now. um, yeah, I can kind of quickly tell you what's going on in this beat. um, so I have the drums running through this Nebulae V2 by Qubit. The Nebulae is basically like a granulated sampler at its core. It has a few other like kind of functions as its own like oscillator, as well as an effects page and a few other things on there. Haven't really delved super deep into it. But what I can do is basically just load samples onto this like little USB stick from my computer, and then plug that into the Nebulae, and it loads samples on there. Another sampler that I just kind of got recently was the Erica's Synth sample drum. So same thing, I can load samples onto an SD card and then pop it into here. And then what you can do with this one though is you can load the sample and then chop the sample into different slices and then trigger those slices, which is kind of cool. And that I mainly been using this for like piano loops and stuff like that. It's melodical stuff that I can kind of chop up and then just trigger manually. Next to that, I have the Qubit chord, which is like a chord like sound generator. Then I have a Qubit Prism, which is a multi-effects kind of processing module. Has delay on it, has a filter on it, has like kind of like this bit crusher kind of thing, like a bit reducer reduction thing. And then next to that, I have a few Pico modules. I have the Pico DSP, which is an effects module. I mainly use it for like delay and reverb. And then I have this Pico trigger, which is it sends out like CV information that I can trigger different modules with. Then I have the Pico voice, which is sound sources, which is this synth voice that you're hearing, this thing. And then that kind of hi-hat thing that you're hearing right now is this mutable instruments plates, and it's being triggered by the trigger basically. And on one side of the plates, it has like percussive stuff, and then the other side is more like synthier kind of sounds. Then up here in this Make Noise skiff case, I have the MST mixer, which is just basically mixes all the stereos or the audio signals, and then I'm able to bounce them out. Then I have this Mutant Brain MIDI to CV converter, which I mainly use with my Electron Digitac. So I'll put the MIDI out from the Digitac into this, and then it has 4 CV outputs that I'm able to trigger things, as well as 12 gate outputs where you can trigger other things. Then I have this Create Audio Cells next to it, which is like this touchpad kind of trigger thing, and you can run like like a sequencer through it, and it can kind of trigger all these like pads the way you want it to. Then I got Maths. This is one of my first modules. I mainly got Maths because it was in everybody's rack for the most part. I still don't really fully understand what it does, but it does a few things. Then I have this Mutable Instruments Clouds, which is a clone, and it's kind of like this weird delay kind of module. Then I have this Tip Top Audio Forbidden Planet filter, which I'm able to kind of cut off the frequency on things. And then next to that, I have the Pittsburgh Audio Lifeforms ADSR, and then I have, which is an envelope, and then I have this this Dope A130 VCA, which is an amplifier. But I use these two in conjunction with each other, especially when I'm running like an oscillator through it. You can control the oscillator that way. This can also be used as a kind of like an audio mixer or an amplifier, basically. Then I have the Create Audio chips, which has two sound sources, like two kind of VCOs, I guess, and then an LFO on it. And then I have this Pico mod by Erica Synth, and that's being triggered by the trigger. And then I mainly use this in conjunction with like the ADSR and the VCA, and then like an oscillator and stuff like that. Some cool stuff. But yeah, and then this is kind of like the newest thing, this nifty case by Create Audio. It has a USB connector, which you can connect to your computer. So I can basically sequence like everything in Ableton, and then it has like these CV outs and gate outs, which can trigger different modules as well as a clock source, which is kind of cool. And I can basically do all my sequencing on the computer and then still be able to trigger all this stuff. You can also hook up like the Electron Digitac because it has two MIDI ins and outs, or it has a MIDI in actually, a MIDI in and a MIDI through on the back, and then you can use the like Electron Digitac to sequence everything, or even this MPC Live I can use to trigger everything. But for the most part, I still do most of my drum programming externally, so I'll program all my drums either on the Digitac or the MPC Live, or like mainly on Ableton, and then I'll use my modular stuff for like sound sources for the most part, and then just kind of come up with like crazy kind of patterns and stuff like that, or like percussive stuff. And then I also have this Arturia key step that I've had for a while, but it has CV outs that I'm able to trigger like synths or VCOs. And then I have this Korg SQ1, which I'm using right now with this. But this is the main clock for what you just heard, and then it has like kind of like it's like a step sequencer, and then I'm able to kind of just punch in what steps that I want played, and then the knobs you can adjust those to different values, so you can adjust pitch or whatever it is that you need to adjust. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's kind of like what you're hearing right now, the drums and all this other stuff here. I like to trigger the sample drum manually, because if anybody can actually help me out with this, I don't know how to chop up the sample on the sample drum and then play them on the keys, like be able to trigger each individual slice on the keys. I mean, I can trigger the sample and it'll play like forward, or it'll play random, however I set it on the sample drum, but I don't know how to use the keys like in order that to play the different chops, and that'd be great if I could do that. I feel like I'd be using it kind of like an MPC, or like how I do on Ableton or something like that. So if anybody can actually help me out on that. So basically what I want to do is create like maybe like 8 to 16 slices, and then be able to use the keyboard to trigger each of those slices individually manually, rather than, I don't know, the way it's kind of like set up is like if I press a key on the key step, it'll trigger a sample or a slice, but then when I go to the next key, it'll trigger the same slice. So I don't know how to exactly do that. I know it's probably something in the CV settings, but I haven't been able to figure it out. And I haven't seen any videos on it. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of like my very modest kind of modular setup. It's super fun to kind of get into this rather than just stick to a computer screen and like, kind of be a robot in the zone, you know what I'm saying? And what's cool about the modular stuff is there's like this different exploration of sounds, and you can kind of like tweak things and kind of create your own sound in a way, like your own kind of like signature kind of sound, just using a bunch of patch cables and patching different things and running them through effects and stuff like that. And it like having the tactile tactile feel of knobs and buttons and stuff like that. It's way better than using a mouse. But yeah, that's kind of like how I kind of come up with a skeleton on the modular stuff. Then I'll just bounce all the audio out either to Ableton, and then I'll just finish it in Ableton, or sometimes I'll just come up with like a cool melodical kind of loop, and then I use my SP404 to just capture that loop real fast, just on the fly. That I don't really use my SP404 to make beats itself, but I use it mainly for effects. But then I use the pads now just to kind of capture really quick ideas, like really quick kind of loops with the modular stuff. And then I'm able to just kind of save those on the fly rather than trying to memorize all these patch cables and where the knobs go and everything. Because once you remove everything, all the cables and everything kind of resets, then it's hard to recreate what you just did. So you have to kind of record stuff like right away. But yeah, super simple kind of like track here, just making stuff. Yeah, and then that's a few other drum loops on here. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, like I said, I'm still like learning a lot. There's still a lot of things I truly don't understand, but just watching other YouTube videos and other people getting into it. Some other producers, like I'm at my core, like I'm a hip hop soul producer, and the modular stuff, when you look at it, when you see it from like an outside perspective, it's very electronic music driven. So a lot of people that are super into modular, that's the music that they make. It's like a bunch of electronic type of music or like ambient kind of stuff. And I really like the ambient stuff. But then me personally, like I'm like a hip hop producer, so like trying to figure out how to use modular stuff with samples in the way that I've been using them for so many years is a little bit kind of like a different step for me, or like have to kind of do a lot of research. But check out some other YouTubers and producers. B-Boy Tech Report, he does a lot of cool things. My man DSTL Daniel, he's a super dope just producer in general. He uses a lot of modular stuff. Shout out to Ollie the Architect. I'm learning so much from that guy as well, just about signal flow and stuff like that. But those are the types of producers that I look up to when it comes to trying to getting into modular stuff. It's just a bunch of like that's the type of music that I kind of want to make, like just like kind of like sometimes just really hard driven kind of beats, or like the beat that you just heard is more like piano and soul and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of how I make stuff, just quick little sketch out skeleton stuff, just me messing around, and then I'll just bounce it into Ableton and then just finish it there. But yeah, thanks again for tuning in, guys. Sorry this video, maybe it was informative, I don't know. But yeah, I have a new single out on all digital platforms called Bustling. You can check it out. My podcast, Fredcast, is available, and my current album, Beyond the Sea of Trees, which I released last year, is still available. You can still find it on vinyl. You can still go onto my Bandcamp and purchase it, or stream it on Spotify and stuff like that. But yeah, thanks again, guys. Peace.